So in the meantime, welcome for all of you, guys and ladies from all over the world, from what I've seen in the introduction. So today's presentation will be about institutional and financial framework for energy efficiency introductions in the world. Okay, much better. And I will cover different aspects related to energy efficiency. First off, it will be the institutional framework for energy efficiency implementation. So what kind of institution, energy agency is needed to implement those kind of activity. Then we'll look at the financial sources. And the third item will be the support scheme, including a quick overview of the main differences between the white certificates versus measure-specific incentive or subsidies. Then we'll cover other schemes. So let's look at the institutional framework first. So there's different ways to implement energy efficiency activities in the world. And different surveys and studies have been done. And we can generally classify the institutional framework between three main actors. Energy agency is the first one. Utility, that are very often enrolled by government to deliver energy efficiency initiatives to their customers. And you have the private sector's support activities, where you will just develop the capacity of the private sector to offer solutions to the market. So let's look at the energy agency first. So energy agency are organizations that are created by the government, and it's still a very popular way for implementation of energy efficiency programs in the world. So there's a lot of survey that have been done in the recent year on energy policy and governance, and one of them is the IEA 2000 that was realized in 2010, and it concluded that 60% of world countries have one form or another of the government energy agency. So you see on the graph on the right here the difference in different parts of the world. So on the left you have the Europe, you have America here, and Asia, where there's more than 80% of the country that have some forms of energy agency. You have here the non-OECD Asia and South America, where the number of countries range between 40 and 50%. You have Africa, where about 65% of the country has one form of energy agency. And Middle East is about 50% here. So overall, 60%. So you see that it's a quite popular way to organize the institutional framework for delivering energy efficiency regulation and programs to the market. Let's look at the different way those agencies have been created in the past. So first model is maybe the oldest model that was created at the end of the 70s, is the government agency. So government agency can be created within a ministry, or they can be created as a separate para-governmental entity. So it can include different type of organization. One of them is organizations that have very broad mandates. So they will look not only at energy efficiency and renewable energy, but also at very broad aspect of the energy sector, energy security, energy supply. They can be in charge of development of natural resource, gas, oil, coal in some countries also. On the other end of the spectrum, you have organizations that are focused or dedicated to energy efficiency and renewable energy. So there are some examples here, like in Morocco, you have the ADER, which is an organization that is focused on energy efficiency and renewable energy. In Slovakia, you have the Slovakia Energy Agency, which has a very broad mandate regarding to the energy sector governance. In Mexico, the former CONAE have evolved into what is called now CONUE, and that's an organization that is really focused on energy efficiency activities. Let's have a look at the practical example here on how Vietnam did handle the creation of the energy agency. So in Vietnam, the ministry that have the overall responsibility for implementation of the government policy is MOIT, which is the Ministry of Industry and Trade. So this ministry is responsible for the implementation of the Vietnam Energy Efficiency Program. And this program is really the political agenda of Vietnamese government toward sustainability for energy efficiency. So MOIT will be responsible for handling the steering committee, so organization of the different stakeholders, including several ministries that will participate at a high level into the orientation, so how the policies from the government will be implemented. Within MOIT, there was the creation of special entity, an energy agency, which is called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Office. That was created in 2006 by a ministry decision. They have a staff of approximately 10 persons, but they coordinate the works of a lot of other human resource in different ministry and governmental organizations. So a lot of their operation is toward coordination, preparation of the action plan, and including program design and implementation. I would say that over the last 5 years, they had focused a lot on the regulatory aspect. So Vietnam is in the process of implementing a comprehensive regulatory framework, and the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Office is responsible largely for those implementation. This includes the drafting of energy efficiency law, the preparation of minimum energy performance standard, or MEPS. There is a labeling activity for lighting that have been implemented already on a voluntary basis. And there is several other regulations in the draft form, including a large energy users regulation that will make mandatory the realization of energy audits. There is also other side activity like the creation of a national database for energy usage, just to follow the indicators for various subsectors and to be able to measure the progress in the market. So the funding for this organization came from the government, and it was about $2 million in the fiscal years 2007 and 2008. But it did increase a lot over the last few years. Now it's about 12 million per year for the latest fiscal cycle or financing cycle of 2012 to 2015. So altogether it will be close to 50 million US dollar that will be invested in energy efficiency by this agency. Let's look at others model now. So there's other way to create energy agency where it will not be a government organization, but it will be something with more autonomy and way to operate or legal basis quite different. You have two broad categories here that we find in the market. There's the independent statutory authority and the independent corporation, which is really like any private corporations with the same status and legal obligations. So both of those type of organizations will have a board of directors, they will have directions, maybe a president, and different department and organization. You have in these organizations really more flexibility for decision in the way the policy will be implemented or the activity will be implemented than within a ministry. So that's there is several examples like the Sustainable Energy Ireland organization, the UK Energy Saving Trust, and for the independent corporation model, we can cite KEMCO, which is the Korean Energy Management Corporation, or the South Africa NEEA, which is located within CEF. CEF is an organization that have the mandate to develop oil and natural gas resource in South Africa. So that's different example of those models, but there is many others. If we go to other alternative models, maybe that are less popular or that we find less often in the market, but still exist, there's the model where the energy agency is located within a research institution. So we can give the example here of Jordan. In Jordan, you have the Royal Scientific Society that hosts the National Energy Research Center, or NERC. So that's an organization with a staff of about 15 persons that do energy audit programs and support the government for the preparation of elaboration of regulation or research or any other support activities that is required. You have also the model of public-private partnership. So as the name implies, the funding for those kind of organizations will come at the same time from the government and from society, private society or associations that will participate both in the financing and in the determination of the objective and action plan of the organization. So one of those organizations is the Agencia Chilena de Eficiencia Energética. So they are located in Santiago, Chile. It's an organization with about 15 persons, and they run different programs. They have several communication activity going on right now. They work also to implement a broad energy audit program for industry. And they run also a program for communications and coordination with different stakeholders in the market. So they have a team of 2 or 3 persons that just handle the communication with different stakeholders. So that's another model that we can find in the market. Let's talk now about the responsibility of those organizations. So that will vary a lot. There has been also a lot of studies and research on the governance for energy efficiency. And what has been found is that there is no ideal models. Everything varies from country to country depending on the mandate and the policies of the government and the type of organization that are in place. So one of the first things that we note from those organizations is their base mandate. Are they working mainly in energy efficiency? Are they handling also renewable energy, or are they working on both type of energy? Like in Tunisia, the INME, which is the National Agency for Energy Efficiency, is handling both type of products, so energy efficiency and renewable energy. So it's not really products, it's more likely activities and programs. One also of the frequent responsibility of energy agency is the high-level policy support or direct elaboration of policy. So very often the energy agency will have a role to provide information to government. So they will provide reports to regulator. They will make some benchmarking comparison with regulation framework in other countries, some background research on the market. They will support the work of legislator and advisory group. And they can participate sometime in policy paper elaboration. So depends on the mandate that are given to them. Another very frequent activity that we find in energy agencies are law and regulation, drafting or implementations. So they will often participate in regulation drafting, law preparation. That is done very often in close collaboration with ministries representatives. They can also participate in the implementations. What we have seen very often in those kind of agencies is building code preparation and implementation. Not really the enforcement, because the enforcement is more likely to be done by municipality or urban group within municipality that oversees the acceptation of drawing and specification and that deliver a construction permit. But in some countries, building code elaboration and implementation are within the responsibility of the Energy Agency. You will find also activities as building labeling and certifications, elaboration of standard and labeling for equipment and appliances. So on the right side here, you see two different labels that were developed in China. So the first one at the top is the endorsement labeling, so that just provide an information to the consumer that there is this equipment have or meet a minimum standard in the market. And you have the comparative label at the bottom right, which shows where the equipment or how the equipment compared to other similar equipment in the market. So generally there is a lot of research associated with the creation of those labels because label type is a cultural thing, so it takes discussion with stakeholders, it takes focus group with consumers to determine what kind of model they will prefer, what kind of information should be conveyed by the label, and other type of activity like this. Should it be both language or different language on the same label? Like in Tunisia, it's both French and Arabic. And that's the type of question that people developing labeling program have to answer. So I remember in China when they were in the process of developing this label, comparative label, they came up with an idea to have a kind of lotus flower, which means a lot in Chinese culture. And finally, it didn't make it in the final stage. But that was a very nice attempt to match a labeling program with local culture. Look at other activity that we find very often in Energy Agency. Awareness and communication, it's one of the, I would say, first activities that is given to those kind of agency. It includes information campaign, awareness campaign. So it can be a mass media campaign, including television in some countries. It could be radio, it could be journal, printed material preparations, participation in trade fairs. There's several programs where you have a component for young people, so kids and school program. So that's becoming more and more popular in long-term or medium-term vision because those kids are the people that will make decisions on how energy will be used in 10, 15, or 20 years. So it's important just to make them aware of the importance of those issues for the world to come. You have also training and conference. So training generally targets specific stakeholder in the market. So very often you can have training program for architects, engineers. You can have a training program also for retailers of equipment to make them aware of high efficiency equipment that can be available on the international market, but not on the local market. And you can also organize conference seminars like this one and promote public recognition activities. So one of them that we see in several countries is the Energy Awards. So you just provide public recognition for energy efficiency project implemented in the market. Then you have technology deployment activity in Energy Agency. Some of them are the identification of new and advanced technology, demonstration project to bring already working technology, so technology that is mature for deployment in the market. And some agencies also support research and development it's generally for a longer term vision here because it takes time to get a product from the research and development stage to the commercialization stage. On the right side here you see an example of a product that have bring a lot of interest from utilities and government in the recent years. So that's the magnetic bearing compressor that is used in air conditioning cooling applications. And that's a technology that have the benefit to increase by a large proportion the part load efficiency of those kind of equipment. So it's just provided as an example. So in this seminar, we don't promote any particular technology, but that's a real case study of a technology that did create a lot of buzzword and discussion in the energy efficiency circles in the recent years. So let's look at another very important portion of energy agency responsibility, which is the program management. So program management, of course, means looking at financial resource, so budget management, preparation, organizations, management. Then you run the program. You use that money to run generally two different broad category of program. One of them is what we call resource acquisitions, where the utility or the government will provide financial incentive to specific technology in the market. So you're basically buying kilowatt hours of savings from customers by doing that. The other approach, which is a little bit more complex, but is aiming at a more profound change in the market, is the market transformation approach. What you try to do in market transformation is to remove barrier existing in the market. So barrier could be lack of understanding or lack of knowledge of some technology by some market actors. It can be simply that the technology is not on the shelf. It's not available. So you will try here not to give money directly to the customer to purchase the technology, but you will invest the budget and resource and money to transform the market. Generally, it's include a lot of communication, capacity building, training, but it could include some kind of financial incentive. What we see more often is paying for the intermediary to introduce some high efficiency product on the market. So we have seen in the recent year a lot of market transformation program working with television dealers to bring high efficiency or Energy Star models on the market. A quick word about the program stage. We will see that a little bit more in depth in the utility section in a few minutes. So here we have different stage: planning, design, operation, and evaluations. Evaluation is one of the quite important activity to integrate in program management, because that's where you will calculate the real net saving associated with a program. Last point that we see very often in energy agency is the management of collaboration and partnership with all the stakeholders. So that's partner in reality in the market. Is it better to have a large agency or a very small agency focus on energy efficiency? So again, the jury is still out on that very important question. There was so many studies done to find the best or ideal governance model for energy efficiency. And what was found in all those studies, and it really depends of the country specifics and policies, actors. So a large organization is better for visibility. It allows easier networking. It can access funds more easily. Of course, it needs top management attention for energy efficiency matters. If you are in a large organization with different mandates, it could be more difficult to achieve, to get the attention you need for energy efficiency or renewable energy. It can become a channel for international donors also. The disadvantage is just the other side of the coin. So because you're in a large organizations, if the top management have other items on their political agenda, you can get lack of resource even if you're in a very large organizations. A large organization brings a more complex decision process, so that's another drawback that was noted by several stakeholders in different countries. And you have also the same problem you can have with funding you will get with human resource. So if the political agenda is on other aspect instead of energy efficiency in the organization, you will likely bring the best resource, the best manager to these other areas. So you can lack at the same time funding and human resource. So we'll not have the time today to cover in depth all the institutional arrangement, pro and cons, but I just put a reference from a 2008 study realized by the World Bank. There's another one by the International Energy Agency done in 2010 that bring a lot of insight on the different models, pros and cons. So I just invite you to get those references. Generally, if you're good at Google, Google will be your friend to find them. Again, Energy Agency organization, the institutional framework depends a lot of the country environment. So what is the importance of energy efficiency, energy policy in the overall picture? What are the current institutions? What are their capability? What are their resource, human resource and financial resource? Is the public sector stronger than the private sector? So that's all things you need to take into consideration. You need also to have some knowledge or consider the legal framework, the previous activity that are in place, the target for renewable energy, CO2, the market requirements and funding mechanisms. So that's different items that are all very important when selecting an energy agency models. Let's look now at the utility-based model for implementation of energy efficiency. So utility-based was referred as demand-side management in the beginning of the 80s, so when it all started after the first oil shock. And DSM was, the term was coined in reaction to the traditional approach from utilities. Utility was doing what we call source-side management or supply-side management. They were just looking at how many plants we need to deliver a certain quantity of electricity to manage the growth of customer energy demand. So demand-side managing was just looking the other side of the meter to find activities that will actually reduce the energy consumptions. So DSM now we use the term in a more generic term, so we see in several countries DSM being used for governmental program instead of utility program. So it now becomes generic terms. So how this is implemented? So first, utility-based demand-side management requires a decision generally from the government. So there's generally a policy decision that will enroll the utility to deliver energy efficiency in the market. So there has been some example of voluntary involvement of utility in energy efficiency activities, but it's not the majority because it needs very special project or program to bring financial benefit to the utility. In most of the case, implementing energy efficiency activities means a reduction in profit and revenue for utilities, and that's something that is somewhat a disincentive. More about that later. So government will determine most of the time if utility should be enrolled or not. They will fix the objective, and they will determine who is going to participate. Is it going to be programs for electricity distributor or gas distributor or both? We have seen those kind of programs applied mainly when there is a physical connection between the distributor and the consumer. So gas distributor, electricity distributor, I would say, are the large majority of those kind of DSM activity. But we have seen also a small proportion of programs where the generator have been enrolled and the oil distributor also have been enrolled in energy efficiency activity. So DSM can be combined with the supply side planning to create what we call the integrated resource planning. So that's integrating in the long-term vision for a country, both sides of the equation, new plants and energy efficiency and renewable energy. So there's several advantages to DSM, so postpone and avoids infrastructure development costs. There's an advantage also in terms of timing. While it's quite difficult to build a plant in a few years, it takes years to develop the design, get the fundings and bidding process, constructions. Energy efficiency activity can be delivered and prepared in a relatively short time span. Then another advantage, of course, excuse me, will be the reduction in customer energy demand. DSM will provide reduction in growth and of energy demand and greenhouse reduction. There's a long-term benefit also to DSM or energy efficiency in general, so improve the competitiveness, the energy security in a country that's becoming more and more important on the political agenda of several countries, both developed countries, emerging countries, and in development countries. It will improve the energy export-import balance. Again, it's a big burden on some countries that are mainly importers of energy. It could act as a hedge for future shortage. So we have been reading for years about the oil production decrease or the oil production peak that is planned in anything between 5 to 20 years from now. And that's definitively something that energy efficiency can help to mitigate that risk. And it's very often cheaper than adding new capacity. So main problem with DSM-based demand-side management is still the reduction in distributor profit. And that's create, I would say, not only bad feeling, but bad reaction from some utilities that have to implement activities that are really not beneficial for them. So solution has to be found. We'll just discuss this a little bit later in a few slides. Let's look a little bit more in depth into the way DSM is implemented in the market. So first you have to establish load shape and objectives. Then you conduct market research, doing different things, audits, surveys, metering, focus groups. You try to understand how your market operates, what is the penetration of different technology, and where the potential for future improvement lies. Then you will identify a portfolio of measures, you will screen them, then formulate program concept for some of them that seems to be the most interesting. You will do some cost-benefit analysis, then finalize the selection of your program portfolio. Then from that point, you start to prepare the implementation by doing a detailed program design where you will determine what kind of resource, process, database, human resource that you will need to run the program. Then you go to the operation stage. That's really where you do all your field activity, including communications, subsidies for technology, and measurement and verification is the last elements in that process. We have here the example of Thailand program. That's one program and the institutional arrangement that was organized. So the project or program for energy efficiency for the electrical equipment was located within EGAT. EGAT is the Electrical Generating Authority of Thailand, so that's the organization that supervises the operation of the grid. DSMO was the Demand Side Management Office, so the energy agency that was created within EGAT for this particular project. And the project has been evaluated for results after some years of operation, about 5 years of operation. It did bring 17 to 23 terawatt hours of savings and resulted in the implementation of 85 million of T8 tubes, 5 million CFLs, 12 million energy efficient fridge, and 2.8 million air conditioning units. So that's a typical example of how DSM is delivered in a market. So how are we going to solve the problem of lost revenue and lost profit from utility? So there has been different approach to try to solve them, and the most popular is the decoupling mechanism. So in fact, what you do with this mechanism is that you will provide some funding to the utility or some money to the utility to compensate the loss in profit and the loss in energy sales due to the implementation of energy efficiency project. So decoupling mechanism really means that it will be indifferent for utility either to implement energy efficiency program or to increase sales of electricity. So that's a mechanism that have been implemented widely in the US and Canada, and several countries, emerging countries and development countries are also looking at those mechanisms right now. If you want, advantage and disadvantage of decoupling are, of course, advantage is a powerful incentive. There is some disadvantage, and there's some way to mitigate that. But some people were advocating that decoupling mechanism means that you just ensure a level of profitability to utilities participating in DSM, whatever is their real efficiency. But there's a way to mitigate this by studying specifically the effect of the DSM program on the revenue, on the expense, and just providing the decoupling fund from that differential. So we don't see yet decoupling too much in development countries. It's being considered, but we just look here at a typical example of how it's implemented in the market. So that's for the New York typical consumer. And on their bill, they will see a specific charge that is called the revenue decoupling adjustment. So in this particular case, this household will pay about $5 a month. That's something here. Yeah, $5 a month for this decoupling adjustment for the utility. So that will ensure that they will be interested to participate and promote energy efficiency in the future. Can we do better than just decoupling? It's possible to go further. In several countries, there is either incentive or penalties to ensure that the utilities will meet the target or to incentive the utilities to meet target. So incentive is going beyond the decoupling schemes, and it offers a performance premium if the utility meets a certain goal or a certain target. So that was a mechanism introduced initially in California by CPUC, and it's still used by several states in US, Canada, and some European countries also. Penalty is the other way to look at the target achievement problems. And let's say in France, for example, if utilities does not deliver their target for energy efficiency, they can receive or they will have to pay penalties to the regulatory agency. So that's two different ways to look at it. Let's have a quick look at the different mechanisms also that have been implemented to provide financial support for energy conservation measures in some countries. So I just put it as thinking outside of the box. So outside of the box of subsidies, which is for the last 30 years one of the main mechanisms to provide support. But more and more we see innovative approach like unbilled financing. So that has been discussed for maybe 15 years. So the idea is not really new, but we see more and more utilities now starting to implement them and providing easy access to finance for energy efficiency measure in the market. And in some market, that's really was one of the big barriers. So people were not really against investing in energy efficiency, but it was just too much an hassle. It was not a priority. So by designing a mechanism that is quite simple to participate in, and with easy repayment approach, it allows to penetrate those kind of market where generally customers were not reacting to traditional program. So unbilled financing is the provision of financing, including sometimes incentive in the form of low interest or a grace period or whatever other financial incentive could be incorporated. Very simple administrative procedure for enrollment. Sometimes there is partners that already do the installation, so customer doesn't have to shop around with 5 or 6 providers for technology. The price is already fixed in advance. So it makes the whole process quite simple. And the bill, the charge for the equipment purchases appear on the bill for a certain number of years as fixed installments. So a lot of advantage, one bill, one payment. It's easy, it's convenient, it's constant. People know what they have to pay. They can get pretty good interest or facility for investment, no down payment. So that's all very interesting and attractive. Strangely, when we look at the drawback, several studies were conducted where we see that what constitutes an advantage for some people is also a drawback for others. So some people complain that it requires fixed payment, it's not flexible, it's always the same amount month after month, independent of your earning. So that's the two sides of the coin that we see as advantage and disadvantage here. Let's have a quick discussion about private sector support, because there's another webinar that will discuss ESCO models. But in several countries, governments have decided that one of the ways to support energy efficiency in production was to create a strong private sector market that could deliver energy efficiency. And very often the type of activity selected by the government was the support of emergence of energy service company. So that has been observed in Brazil, China, Thailand, and many, many other countries. So that will provide some help to structure the market and will allow, even if you remove the subsidy in some years after program introduction, if you remove some subsidies, you will still have a market that can deliver on a commercial basis energy efficiency on the market. One example is Tunisia. Tunisia has a very broad range of initiative for energy efficiency. One of them is the support for ESCO, and they have created a special legal framework. So that's not something that is done in all countries, but in Tunisia they have done a special legal framework. So companies that want to offer performance contract to customer have to go through an ESCO accreditation process. There has been several activities for capacity building of financiers, engineers, promoters, customers, and the government put in place a special fund, which is a guarantee fund, where ESCO or industry can access up to 75% guarantee. So that removes a lot of pressure on the balance sheet of those organizations, and it helps to stimulate the market. We have seen in other countries, other example of support for performance contracting activity or ESCO. Template contract is one of them, investment grade audit, content or typical audits. M&V procedure, like in Mexico, they created the guidelines for M&V. They have some countries have a large bid for government building projects. So government will just put on the market very large projects where ESCO will be invited to participate and submit the bid. So that can create an overnight market for ESCO and help to structure the industry. Sometimes ESCO emergence in country needs a change in bidding procedure, especially from government agency, and change also to accounting rules. But all those elements will be covered in more details in the future seminar. Let's look now at the financial source, where the money is coming from, really. So here you see the three main actors in the market that can gather money to realize energy efficiency initiative or program or project. You have the government on the left, energy supplier in the center, and commercial on the right. So government can rely on tax, emission allowance, or public charge to raise money for funding projects. Energy supplier generally can rely on tariff increase, either mandatory or voluntary, or charge to raise money. And the commercial sector, of course, have to just sell services to gather money to release project. Let's look a little bit more into each of the mechanisms. So from government side, of course, there's the universal tax, so corporate or personal income tax, corporate profit, value-added tax on same. So all these streams of revenue are going to the government treasury and could be allocated to the financing of energy efficiency initiative. So we don't need to go more in depth about this one. I think most people understand this simple process. It has been around since the 70s, end of the 70s, as the first financing source for energy efficiency programs. So advantage is it's relatively simple. It's a decision, budget decision from the Ministry of Finance following government political decisions. It's a fund transfer, so it's relatively simple to administrate also. Main drawback here is that you don't send a price signal, you don't target specifically energy user with those kind of general fiscal system. So that's why a lot of government introduced a dedicated tax in the market. So it could be tax on energy purchase or energy sales. It could be energy production tax, extraction of mineral resource tax, CO2 taxes. It could be tax on inefficient equipment or custom on inefficient equipment. And in some country, again, Tunisia has created funding for their energy efficiency programs, raising tax on what they call, what they consider luxury equipment like cars and air conditioning units. So that kind of source will bring a clear signal on the market. They will send a signal to the energy consumer that it costs money, additional money to use those kind of equipment or to use that resources. Emission allowances is another way to finance energy efficiency program. And by the way, it's interesting to note that here we just look at the individual mechanism. So government, GHG, different other source tariff increase, but in several countries we find a combination of those financial sources to ultimately finance a portfolio of projects. So GHG emission allowance. So emission allowance can be in the cap and trade programs. The allowance can be either sold or given to the participating industries. In several countries now, there's a trend to allocate GHG allowance by auctions. And part of the income coming from the auctions can be dedicated to the realizations of or implementation of energy efficiency program. That's what we have seen in the northeast of U.S. with the Regional Green Gas Initiative. And they use part of the revenue to finance program in different states. So for instance, neither their program is using some of the money from the RGGI to finance their programs, using also other sources like DOE and rate increase and special charge. European Union also is looking at auctioning schemes for 2012 and following years. Public charge is another way to raise money. That's the broad category of social levies. And it's a charge that is added to energy costs or energy consuming equipment to raise money. So for the customer, it's generally very similar to a taxation mechanism. So you pay more for energy, you pay more for your equipment. On the other hand, the name and regulatory basis for the two mechanisms, the tax against the public charge, are quite different. Sometimes the charge will be integrated by the invoice, so the utility will be mandated by the government to collect the public charge. Other times it's directly equipment sales organization that will collect the public charge on behalf of the government. It could be added to the energy invoice. Sometimes it's a separate amount. Sometimes it's integrated in the rate structures. Another very popular way to finance energy efficiency program is the mandatory energy rate increase. So government or regulatory agency will approve an increase in energy tariffs to finance energy efficiency programs on 1 to 3 years cycle. So it's a approach that is used extensively in North America, in Europe, and in emerging countries all around the world. We found in the market different types of application of that energy increase. Could be uniform, differentiated by sector, or inverted tariffs, or that's the more you consume, the more you pay. You find inverted tariff programs in Japan, in Australia, in South Africa, in several states in U.S., California, and the western part of Canada also. It's quite popular. Beside the mandatory energy increase, you have also voluntary energy increase that are found in several countries. That include the sale of traceable energy. So you request the customer to pay more for either renewable energy, for energy that is compensated in CO2 emissions, or that is compensated in energy savings. So energy saving traceability could be done through white certificate program or program evaluations, which is the traditional approach for DSM-based energy efficiency. Carbon finance is another source of financing that is used in development country, especially countries that have access to CDM and the future NAMA mechanism. So program of activity is used widely for CFL program like in Uruguay. So there's a special methodology that have been created for the CDM for that kind of programmatic approach. So once the certificates are created through energy efficiency activity, they could be sold on the international market. It could be a government, private entity also, or non-profit organizations that will purchase those certificates, CER, on the market. So the first Kyoto period was extended, so it's still a mechanism that is available, and we are looking forward for NAMA introduction in the future years. A quick discussion about white certificate versus the traditional energy efficiency evaluation and program approach. So white certificate, I call this the European way because it was adopted in UK, France, Italy, but that's not so clean cut because there is other countries like Uruguay is considering white certificate. There's a couple of states in US also that are playing with the concept. Minnesota is one of them. That Michigan, excuse me, and Connecticut also are playing with those concepts. So under that model, utilities have energy efficiency target to deliver. In Europe, it's called ESCO, or energy saving obligation, or energy efficiency obligations. And in order to meet those obligations, they will purchase white certificate on the market. So economic theory behind white certificate is that the market will react and will find the way to provide at the best cost the energy efficiency in the market, so that the pricing will reflect the lowest potential source available, then it will increase as those sources with low cost are depleted. In practice, it's not so evident because the market is controlled by a few large buyers, so that's mainly the utility, and there's a lot of over-the-counter transactions. So pricing is not as floating as in other commodity in the world. But that's the theory that is behind the white certificate. By the way, white certificate also allow you to bank the certificate, and you can have other market actors, traders that will participate in the market. Uruguay decided to introduce energy efficiency certificate. So their scheme will be a levy of 0.13% of all the energy saved. They created the Uruguayan Trust for Energy Efficiency, and they will devote 60% of the fund to the purchase of energy efficiency certificate. Let's look at the other approach. That was the one used extensively at the beginning of the 80s, and it's still very popular. I call this the North American way, but again, it's not clean cut. It's used all around the world. It just refers to the fact that it was introduced in North America in the 80s, beginning of the 80s. So here again, the utilities will have energy efficiency target to deliver, so we just call them another words, another terms. It's very often EEPS, Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard, or EERS, Resource Standard. The incentive will be decided by the program managers, and it takes different form. Instead of a single price per kilowatt hour delivered, like in the white certificate, it could be per unit, money per fixture. It could be money per kilowatt nominal. Let's say a 50 kilowatt nominal motors will receive a certain level of subsidies. It could be money per kilowatt hour, or it could be deemed saving, or money per kilowatt hour for real demonstrated savings. And again, the program manager have a lot of flexibility here to decide what will be the level. Of course, it's also market-driven in some way, because the manager, if they, let's say, introduce a program with too low subsidies, the market will just react by not participating. So there's a kind of feedback mechanism even in those kind of programs. Last slide is about other support schemes that have been used extensively by some government, and that's fiscal incentive. So that's special fiscal rules that government put in place for, let's say, reduce the custom rate for certain equipment, heat exchanger or high efficiency product or frequent target. You can have tax deductions or value-added tax eliminations for some specific product. Generally, that comes with some complexity in terms of implementation, so it has pro and drawback again. Tax deduction for home renovations on the income tax and accelerated depreciation are other mechanisms that can be found. So with that, I end the formal portion of the presentation. So thank you all for listening. And Fernando, you have the lead.
Yes, so thank you very much, Pierre, for your wide presentation, very interesting. So I would invite all our participants to submit your questions now. In the meanwhile, we already have some of them. So we have the first question coming from Xavier Lemaire. So why the percentage of countries with energy efficiency agency is so low in South America compared to Africa, for instance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I cannot answer specifically this one because the various studies that I have consulted or when I visit those countries, there's simply no very in-depth or comprehensive data why some country elected not to create such agency. So I guess it's just a question of governance mainly and where in the political process government is in the creation. And also what is the importance? In some countries, the decision is made on the basis of do we need to help the private sectors to implement energy efficiency activities, or should we just provide, let's say, communication or general support, which is done within a ministry, but not necessarily with a specific agency. So that's my best bet at this differences.
Okay. So another question from Will. I know that the energy efficiency policy in Japan has been successful. Could you make some comparative examples related to other countries? Thanks.
Yeah, I did already mention one of the country that I like to present is Tunisia. So we know that there has been a lot of political change in Tunisia, but Tunisia has always been for me one of the country where they did implement a large spectrum of policies. And that was back at the time when Tunisia switched from a net exporter of natural gas to a net importer. At that time, Ben Ali, that was head of the country, decided that energy efficiency was on the top of the political agenda. And he has always put a lot of attention and pressure for putting in place tools and process. So that's why that's an example of country where you have activities in the residential sectors with regulations for building codes, for labeling of buildings, several activity targeting the MEPS. That's one of the first country in Africa that implemented MEPS for refrigerator, replicating the European process. So that's, I would say, one of the countries that came to mind. But there is so many countries that are doing very nice and interesting things. I think also Vietnam. Vietnam is progressing a lot in South Asia. In the recent years, they have put in place a very comprehensive framework, including the regulatory frameworks and different programs. But a lot of other countries also are progressing quite rapidly.
Okay. So, well, on my side, I have a question about the demand-side management programs. What kind of industries are the best suit to participate?
In fact, that's a program manager decision because DSM generally is done by utility. Are you talking here of DSM implemented by utility or DSM in the generic term, so government or utility base?
Well, I had more in mind the industries that based on their industrial process, they can switch consumption. And then I was wondering whether you had in mind this picture of the kind of industries that are good for participating in programs of basically shifting demand.
Yeah, a lot of industry have potential. Generally, what is done at the beginning of a planning process for a country, you just look at your industrial base, what are the kind of industry you have in large quantity. You try to evaluate the potential for process improvement and for auxiliary equipment improvement. What have been found in several countries is that on almost all kind of industry, the auxiliary process is the easiest potential you can tackle because there's much more actors that can improve the pumping system, ventilation system, the compressor system. So it's relatively easy to build the capacity in a country to deliver those kind of energy efficiency projects. If you go in the heart of the process, so modifying furnace and oven for a very specific process, it becomes much more complex. It needs very special skills. So I think most of the country decided to go with the auxiliary system first for the industry. And after that, looking maybe more into the process at a second stage where some capacity have built in. But there's a lot of potential in the food sectors. There's a lot of potential in the cement industry also, just to name a few. Some sectors that are more difficult to work in are, let's say, the big aluminum plant. That's a typical example. You have 95% of the electricity going to the process, and generally the process, you cannot really, as an auditor, goes to those plants and change those processes. There is a specific research institute working full-time on the improvement and optimization of this 95% energy usage in the process. So you basically, for an aluminum plant, look at the 5% auxiliary equipment. So I don't know if this answers your question, Fernando.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have another question. So for developing countries like Tanzania, where energy is still not a problem compared to others, do you think that energy efficiency programs are practical?
Yeah, I would say yes. In fact, I was in Tanzania last year participating in the elaboration of portfolio of programs. So we have been evaluating the potential in large industry, medium-sized industry, and all other market segment also. And there is definitively a potential in Tanzania for energy efficiency improvement, and that's cost-effective improvement. What I've been surprised in Tanzania is that a lot of the very large organizations, so breweries, cement industries, metal forming industries, have been purchased or have agreement with developed countries or very powerful groups in the regions. And there is some of these large industry that have already done a lot in terms of progress for energy efficiency. So I have visited several industry with brand new production lines. There's a breweries that I remember that have even they are at par with the best breweries you can find in the world. So that's a new trend that we see a lot in development countries. So there's a more rapid transfer of technology to the high end of the industry. So the large industry are progressing quite fast.
Okay. Could you now develop a bit more on the white certificate scheme in Uruguay?
I would like so, David, but it's more difficult because at this point I didn't find recent information. So I was in Uruguay maybe a couple of years ago when decision was made and the fund was the general scheme was drafted, but there's very few information on how the market operate and what's the real result on the field. And that's the same. I'm just doing a review of white certificate approach in different countries, and I was exchanging with a gentleman in Michigan yesterday, where there was also relatively few information. That's the same for UK. There was not so many transactions during the first year of the program, so it's still a work in progress, I guess, for Uruguay, the white certificate schemes and what it will deliver.
Okay, great. So we have here an opinion. From Arne Mossen, he suggests that the UN creates a fund that gets financed by oil multinationals whenever there is an environmental disaster and use of money to offer incentives for users of energy efficient and renewable energy systems in the third world. What would be your opinion on this idea?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I would say my first reaction is probably if we just look at the difficulty of international negotiation, we just look at the, can we call that a mess about Kyoto negotiations? And so it's so difficult to get all the people, all the countries to agree to a common scheme. And even in a country, it's quite difficult. What we observe in the U.S. and Canada right now, for just to give two examples, is that the federal government is a little bit behind the state and the province. So it seems to be easier to implement regional or limited area schemes to tackle energy efficiency problem and resource problem for the near future than going into those large international and broad negotiation that bring so many different point of view and political issues and competitive issue between countries that you never see the end of the tunnel of the negotiation phase.
Okay. Thank you. So Sorry, another question from Xavier. So, is decoupling less useful in the context of developing countries because of the high increase of energy demands anyway? So, increase of utility income?
I would say no, because the problem still is the same. Even if the utility see its global income increasing, it, nevertheless, uh, they have a natural tendency. I did work a lot with utility, and basically you have to change the mind of the higher management. Very often the higher management of utilities are people that have a very large experience, broad capacity in planning, development of source of productions, and for some of those management, it's really an alien concept to save energy, to work against electricity sales. And it takes time to convince them or to enroll them by force, by political power. So decoupling, I think, is still part of the solutions. But I agree with you that if you are in a very high increase in demand, you need maybe less decoupling, but you need at least to compensate them. If it's private enterprise, they don't have to lose money by doing energy efficiency instead of of doing their natural trade or business.
Okay. So another question from Maxwell Kelly. How would government agency ensure energy efficiency capacity obligation after raising financial incentives?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if we are talking here of the government program or utility program. But let's say generally, if we talk about government program, we find in the market a couple of different approach. There's some country where the government fix some objective, but there's no penalty for the government itself if they are not met. So there's no really obligations. So what is done really is more a process where you implement some project, you try to reach the target, then if it's not met when you do the final evaluation, impact evaluation of the program, then you will do the process again. You will improve the program and process to try to achieve the objective. Yeah, if it's the question is really for government agencies. So generally, that's what we see. So there's no penalty. If it's utility based and the government just provide the political agenda, then there could be penalty, and that's really a way to ensure that utility will get their attention to those target and program, because they don't want to pay the penalty, which is generally higher than the cost to run a successful program that will materialize the potential at lower cost in the market.
Okay, great. Another question, whether DSM, demand-side management, could be implemented at public transport as well.
Yeah, there is some experience. I would say there is less experience. I have seen more programs that target fleet of car or truck, and that's very often programmed for fuel switching, so replacing fuel by natural gas. Again, I can bring here the experience of Tunisia. Tunisia did run for years, and it's still in place. They have a program for public transportation where all the public transportations, not only public transportation, but even the trucks and commercial operation, have to go through motors fine tuning every so many months. So there is a specific shops that have been created and overseen by the government where all the trucks have to go to ensure that they are well tuned, which was a quite successful experience. And that was something relatively innovative, one that was created. So yes, it's possible to implement some activity in the transport sector.
Great. Well, on my side, I had one particular question. So it's about the products that are not similar to bulbs or appliances that can be well, classified according to a label based on the energy efficiency performance, but on how the products are used in a complete installation. So, for instance, whether if my electrical installation can be built with basically thicker cables, this will spend less energy in losses. Do you have any experience or any idea on how to regulate this or how to promote the use of the efficient use of materials to get a high performance installation?
Yeah, that's a good question, Fernando. In fact, already in the market, we find energy efficiency program that tackle both aspects. There is a program that we call normalize. So they are looking at specific technology and they will give a certain quantity of money, subsidies for those kind of applications that are quite normalized. So you know approximately how many hours it's used. You can calculate on a unit by unit basis what will be the profitability. Then you have those other measures that are more based on better design, innovative approach, and there is specific DSM program that just try to tackle those elements. So some programs just target, let's say, the new construction building. So you will compare a baseline building to an improved buildings. And it's done very often using software, uh, different software. DOE is one of the software that is very used, or in some agency like Lebanon created with the University of Lebanon created specific tools that allows to compare a baseline building with an improved buildings, and that could be associated with DSM program that will provide some fundings if you go beyond the baseline. And those programs exist already in several countries.
Then in this case, the proposal is based on the use of software. How this software should be defined? I mean, this should be accessible to anybody. This should be approved by any regulatory authority. How to handle this this software?
Yeah, generally you find both approach in the market. There's some program where you can use any approved software. So that's generally URLE simulation software, DOE, BLAST, Transys in Europe is more used for that those kind of purpose. And there's other approach where the software will be limited in size. Like in Canada, we have software that is called EE4 that is just a shelf. Generally, it's just software that limit functionality of already existing software. So EE4 just limit DOE software, or even here in the Quebec province, Hydro-Quebec run a program where the software is a version of DOE that have been limited. So in order to create the baseline, there's some automatic input that are done by the software to create the baseline and to compare it with the real things. But of course, you need to control those kind of things. You cannot just tell to the people use whatever software you want because it will provide too much opening for creativity, I would say, or creative thinking about energy saving. And in other countries, they just use very fixed tools, like in Sri Lanka for the building codes. It was a simplified Excel spreadsheet that was designed specifically for doing those kind of analysis. So it was controlled by the government. It was more the utility in that case.
Mm-hmm. Should it be a free software accessible for anybody, or just approving, let's say, private company softwares, and then people using that have to, well, basically buy the licenses? What would be more recommendable?
Recommendable. Well, I would say what I have seen more is approach where the generic software is used, but it's licensed by the program operator. So if an entity, government entity or utility have to run a program, they will license the software, they will create the front-end interface for the user, and that will mean that the software will be free of access for all participants.
Okay.
So most of the time it's free of access.
Okay.